Hey everybody, welcome back to Lettermen Row. I'm Austin Ward, that's Spencer Holbrook, this is Jeremy Birmingham. This is the latest in our positional breakdowns brought to you by Buyers Auto. We're looking at the revamped, reloaded, ready to go crew of wide receivers for Brian Hartline and the Buckeyes. You know, 6 guys over the last 2 years have gone on to sign NFL deals. They're not
Zone 6.
They're not in there anymore. So you got to replace those guys. You do have Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, and then a little bit of uncertainty, but a lot of young talent ready to be mined.
I mean, 6 guys off to the NFL, 6 guys deep that are expected to make real impacts this year. And then you have the unknowns, guys like Jalen Harris, guys like Cameron Babb coming back from injury. What is happening with CJ Saunders? How do the 4 freshmen, who are all top 10 in the position in the country, impact the unit? How does Chris Olave bounce back from the Fiesta Bowl finale? A lot of questions, but no question that it's one of the most talented groups in the country.
I think that's what's really fascinating to me is obviously Ryan Day and Brian Hartline have earned the benefit of the doubt with what they do, but that's a lot of losses for people to just say, well, they're going to be really dangerous again. And I don't know exactly how it pans out, Spencer, because Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson can catch a ton of balls, but they also want to keep using 6 guys in that rotation. So that's going to put a lot of pressure on these 4 of the most touted wide receivers you could possibly sign, but they are just freshmen. And I don't know, it took a little bit of time even for Garrett Wilson before he could make that impact last year.
I think it's interesting that we always talk about Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and the 4 freshmen. Well,
yeah.
There's still Jameson Williams.
Yeah.
There's still, you don't know, can Jalen Harris have a year like some of these other wide receivers have had where they come up 1 year and that's all they need is 1 year to make an impact at Ohio State. So the room is super deep. That's what we do know. We know that there's a ton of talent. And if there's one person in the country that can get those guys ready to play, even as freshmen or whatever age they are, it's Brian Hartline. You just kind of have to trust him. I think that's, it's not a blind trust either.
Yeah.
There was a time where it was a blind trust where you say, okay, he can develop guys.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's not a blind trust. You know exactly what you're doing. If you look at the path Garrett Wilson took to stardom last year, he just kept rising and rising and rising, and finally it spilled over and he was elite at the end of the year. I think that's what you could see out of some of these freshmen.
I think Jameson Williams has taken note of that fact that people consider it 2 and the 4.
He has to, and it's we're all guilty of it because we talk about the hype. Jameson Williams was a top 15 receiver in the country coming out of Cardinal Ritter High School in St. Louis in 2019. That dude can fly. He's one of the fastest players on the team. He struggled a little bit consistency catching the football a year ago, but Austin Mack struggled with catching the football when he was younger. Terry McLaurin struggled with catching the football when he was younger. It's all about developing, and it's about how do you get better. Jameson Williams is going to be in that top 3 of the receiver group. I don't care how good the freshmen are. I don't care how touted they are. The value of being here matters, and Jameson Williams has been here, and then you have, obviously Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, and then Jameson Williams, and then it's a fight, and fighting amongst, for competition is what makes great programs great.
And we've talked to Brian Hartline about this a number of times before, but I think he sort of envisions this, Jameson Williams really becoming more prominently involved for Ohio State this year. I'm not trying to divert the conversation from Olave and Garrett Wilson, who I think you're not going to find a better tandem than that anywhere in the country, but you can't win with those 2 alone, in my opinion. At least this offense wouldn't run that way, the way that Ryan Day typically engineers it. So I think you're talking about Olave and one of the fastest guys in the country. They're both the fast, to be honest, but Jameson and then Garrett Wilson maneuvering in the slot. I don't know how you're supposed to defend that. If you've got those 2 guys taking the top off the outside and that spatial awareness, to use one of those coaching terms that Garrett Wilson has, I mean, good luck to you. I don't know.
There were times last year when Chris Olave would start in the slot, he would go in motion and go on a deep route. If you keep Chris Olave on one side and motion Garrett Wilson to the same side as James Williams, however you want to do that with those 3 guys, like you just said, good luck. I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult to stop these guys. Ohio State really likes to use these tight ends now, and they like to have a running back on the field. It's not going to be five wide receivers on the field at the same time 90% of the time.
Yeah.
So with those 3 on the field, you still have to account for Justin Fields with his legs, the running backs, the tight ends. It's going to be very, very difficult to defend these wide receivers, even if there's some inexperience within the unit.
Yeah, I don't want to turn it into the Jameson Williams show hour, but the reality is if Jameson Williams can become a reliable deep threat, the Ohio State offense changes completely. And we saw what happened in 2014 with Devin Smith. If you have that kind of threat down the field, especially now, especially with the quarterback who can run the way that Justin Fields can run, the entire field stretches both vertically and horizontal, and it becomes a totally different beast. So somebody has to fill that role. And Ohio State's missed that part of the offense since Devin Smith left after the 2014 season. So who steps up and can be that guy? They've never been able to really fill that back in with the real vertical threat sense.
Olave's done, he's certainly shown up with some deep throws. Remember the one in the Michigan game, he just, hey, Chris Olave, go line up on the hash and you're gone. I think he can do that, but I think it's also a reminder to go way back to, like, Devin Smith is historically underappreciated for how good he was at doing that. So it's not like it's really easy to replace that skill set he had, but that's neither here nor there. When we're talking about Olave, it's been fascinating to listen to the coaches and teammates talk about his mentality since the slip or the breakdown or whatever you want to call it in the Fiesta Bowl, because starting with Mickey Marotti a few weeks after the season ended, it was like he doesn't like to single guys out as this blossoming leader, but he did for Chris Olave, and that it's fueling everything for him.
It was interesting. We were in the building, Tim and I recording a podcast, and Chris Olave was in there getting work in January. It was interesting when you heard Mickey Marotti talk about it. You heard Brian Hartline talk about it. You've even heard, seen Chris Olave post things on social media. He's going to be on a mission this year. I predicted him to have 1,000 yards receiving. I think that is probably a low bar for him. I think the sky is the absolute limit for him. Last year he was called one of the best deep threats in the country by, I think, Joel Klatt. I think he will be one of the best deep threats in the country. I think he'll just be one of the best wide receivers in the country this year. When you have a quarterback like he's going to have, the chemistry they developed last year, it was already scary last year, but what he can do before he catches the ball it's just incredible. His route running ability, everything he does leading up to the catch, there's nobody like him in the country, I don't think.
And Berm, you got to know this Fab Four, these receivers, a little bit during their recruitment, and we spent a lot of time with Julian Fleming a little bit in Pennsylvania. He's the headliner here. He was the number one overall at some point, and the number one wide receiver recruit in the country. If you're looking for somebody to make maybe a Garrett Wilson type leap, I think he's going to be the one. But these other three bring a lot to the table as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a risk of starting an argument, I actually think
let's do it.
That the one to make the Garrett Wilson type impact as a freshman is probably Jackson Smith-Njigba.
I was just going to say he was going to say that.
He's a much more complete receiver than Julian Fleming is right now. Julian is obviously extremely talented, but his ranking is based a little bit more on projection as opposed to production, where you had it with Jackson Smith-Njigba and G. Scott, who was also a 5-star receiver. And I'm telling you, I don't like to get caught up in like the shorts and shirts Olympics. But if you see G. Scott on social media, that is a different type.
Well, we saw him for 1 week in camp too. I mean, that dude.
That's a different type of freshman.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because he's from the West Coast. Maybe it's just because people don't want to hype up too many guys. I don't know. But, like, that kid is a freak. And, again, of the group, I think it's ironic that Julian Fleming is probably the one that has the most work to do to be the complete receiver coming into college. He may have the highest ceiling, but the other ones have extremely high floors. And what you get with those guys right now is 4 dudes that came in early, know exactly what's going to take to be successful, have seen the blueprint brought in here by Johnny Dixon and Terry McLaurin and Paris Campbell and now Benjamin Victor and Austin Mack and KJ Hill, and they have an opportunity to sort of take what has become an extremely proud receiver group and elevate it to a level that we've never seen at Ohio State.
It's interesting, Berm, that you bring up all 4 of those guys, because all 4 of their huddle tapes, if you watch them, or any of their highlight tapes, they all have blocking in them. You have to be able to block to play at Ohio State. And it's one thing that freshmen a lot of times struggle with is the blocking. All 4 of them are just maulers when they need to be, as far as blocking is concerned. That's why I think they can all 4 get on the field early. And I think especially one that you didn't mention, Mookie Cooper. Mookie Cooper just took guys out when he was in a blocking role. Like, all 4 of these
Mookie's
guys
role is going to be, I don't know, among the more interesting things to watch this season for Ohio State, because since Curtis Samuel left, it's not a spot they really tried to fill with that guy running a lot of end arounds, a lot of the quick handoffs, the pop passes. Mookie Cooper can be that guy. He can also be a guy to return punts and kicks.
Yeah.
He's also a guy that played running back in his first 2 years of high school in St. Louis. So, when you look at him, you see 5'9", whatever, but he's 5'9", 200 pounds. That is the player that Ohio State tried to recruit when they went out and tried to get Rondale Moore and Wan'Dale Robinson, who both have had pretty good success against Ohio State in the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Robinson a little less.
Yeah.
But that's the mold. And how does Ryan Day, we know how that player fit into Urban Meyer's offense.
Yeah.
How does that player fit into Ryan Day's offense?
Yeah, I spent all last year talking about how Jalen Gill could make that position his own, and it didn't happen. And you look even at what Paris Campbell did as Ryan Day started exerting more influence on the offense. I think Paris Campbell only had 9 rushing attempts that year that he had 90 catches. They just don't. There's been a shift away from using that slot H-back pivot role as a rusher, and I don't know. I mean, Mookie Cooper has to be aware of that. He didn't come here like blind, but how quickly, how dominantly can he become a wide receiver playing in the slot? Because I don't think that I don't think they're shifting back. I don't think there's suddenly going to be more jet sweeps or pop passes, because there seems to have been a real conscious effort to phase that out.
Well, at Ohio State, one thing that we've seen over the last decade plus, especially when Urban Meyer got here, was the offense shifted based on the quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. And those passes and those end arounds and went away with Dwayne Haskins because, quite frankly, there was no threat of him keeping the ball or doing anything else. So maybe it gets a little bit more run this year, but no, I mean, you're right. Mookie Cooper, he may have started his high school career as a running back. He finished it as a wide receiver, and that's where he came here to be. He came here to play for Brian Hartline, not to fade into obscurity into a hybrid role. So he's one of those guys that you just know is going to be in the mix because he's just got a really great mentality. And I mean, if we're talking mentality and we're talking St. Louis, I have to bring up Cameron Babb, because if there's a player on this roster at Ohio State that people should be just rooting like hell for, it's Cameron Babb. After what he's been through the last 3 years, everything you see, he looks healthy, he looks in great shape. It's just, you want to root for that kid because he has put everything on the line. Back-to-back preseasons wiped out early by non-contact ACL injuries. Mm-hmm. And there's starting to be some talk, there's starting to be some murmur like, God, you guys should see what this kid looks like. Holy crap. Now you just got to see it all come together. And like the way people rooted for Johnny Dixon after the years and years of knee issues, like it's that kind of thing. And Cameron Babb has done it all with nothing but grace and nothing but passion and a desire to be here. He could have transferred home to Missouri or anywhere else, but he still wants to be at Ohio State. And you hope, if this is his last really chance, you hope that he makes the best of it.
Chives, do you have a wildly specific scenario or prediction that you want to throw out there before we wrap up?
No.
Okay. I'm just going to save that for quarterbacks. And
yeah, I'll just leave that with the quarterbacks.
Well, I thought
it was going to be a good segment.
Done.
Yeah, you're done.
I'm not done because we still have to talk. We're talking about the outside guys, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Jalen Harris is still on the roster. Elijah Gardner is still on the roster. Do you think that those guys find a way to work themselves in the rotation? And again, what the heck happens with C.J. Saunders?
Yeah, well, I didn't really want to talk about that because the decision could come down at any time for C.J. Saunders, but obviously he would
make a prediction.
I think he's going to get his appeal approved, and he'll be a key part of that. And whether that means he has a consistent, regular role in the slot or not is irrelevant to me, because he is such an important leader for Brian Hartline, and he's almost like it's a cliche, but he is an extra coach really in that room. Hartline's told me a number of stories, and the media as a whole, about having tests and putting something up on the board and expecting C.J. Saunders to be able to explain it to everyone on the drop of a hat. That won't change. I mean, he couldn't play in the Big Ten championship game, and his speech in the locker room at halftime was one of the turning points, according to the guys that were there. So, that's a part of it. I think that Jalen Harris, the production has certainly not been there. My understanding is that he and Jameson Williams will be battling for the starting job at one of the outside position opposite Chris Olave, and he has a chance. He's been in the program long enough where he can be a playmaker, where he knows what's going to be expected. He's been with Hartline and Keenan Bailey for years working on his technique. And really, I mean, this is a now or never moment. I don't know. Elijah Gardner's continued to deal with injuries. I don't pencil him into that 6 right now.
I think you're talking about young guys that everyone takes different to develop physically, to develop mentally. And I said this anecdotally on Twitter after the loss to Clemson. Chris Olave was shattered walking off the field that game. And there was every reason in the world for someone like Jalen Harris, who's been at Ohio State for 4 years, who a number of looky-loos and talkabouts on Twitter and social media
those looky-loos
are waiting for him to announce he's entering the transfer portal and get, he doesn't. If there's one guy who could have taken his jersey off after that game and said, you know what, I'm out of here, this doesn't matter, it could have been Jalen Harris. And instead, he was the first guy picking up Chris Olave, walking him off the field, embracing him. Like, to me, not everyone buys in at the same time, but there's no doubt that Jalen Harris has become a good teammate and a silent leader in that locker room for the receivers. And again, I think that the more talent you have, the harder the conversations get, but you're looking for young men who are developing and leading other people. And I think Jalen Harris deserves kudos for what he's done, because he had the potential to walk out of here a number of times and has chosen not to.
This is a feel-good episode for Brent.
He's bringing the heat.
I like these kids, man. They're good kids.
Except hopefully I don't have to edit out any of my CJ Saunders predictions.
There's no editing. That's just a prediction.
I like to be right, though, so I want to have this evidence since we're filming in advance. Spoiler alert. This has been the positional breakdown of the wide receivers, brought to you by Byers Auto. If you're looking for an auto, choose Byers Auto. That's Spencer Holbrook. That is Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. We'll see you next time as the position breakdowns at Lettermen Row roll along.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe below to get the latest videos from Lettermen Row.
We got Letterman Live, we've got the practice report, we got rapid reaction. Hey, and we got Buckeye IQ with Zach Bourne.
For sure. We got recruiting breakdowns with Berm. We got whatever you need. Ohio State football and Ohio State athletics, we've got you covered here at Lettermen Row.